My name is Natalie Pierce, and I was 34 when I finally won custody of my daughter. Emma Pierce was 6, and she slept that night with one hand on my sleeve. The courtroom fight had been long and ugly and exhausting, but it was over. I thought the hardest part was behind us, and I was wrong. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a family group message from my father, Howard Pierce. He was turning 65, and he announced a birthday dinner like it was a royal summons. He listed the restaurant, the time, and who was invited, and then he added a line that made my stomach drop. He said the dinner was only for heirs, and he said I was a dead end. He did not stop there. He made it clear Emma was not welcome either. Reading it felt like being slapped, because he was not just rejecting me, he was rejecting my child. My brothers, Ethan Pierce and Caleb Pierce, reacted with little jokes and thumbs up, like it was normal. Nobody told him to stop, nobody questioned the cruelty, and that silence was its own answer. I stared at the screen, and I could feel old memories rising, holidays where I smiled too hard, dinners where I swallowed words to keep peace. Howard always spoke like he owned the room, and everyone learned to orbit him. For a moment, I wanted to type a reply, something sharp, something that would hurt back. Then I looked at Emma, still curled under her blanket, and I remembered what I promised her. I promised we would build a safe life, and we would not beg for a seat at a table that hated us. So I did not argue, and I did not plead, and I did not explain. I set the phone down, made Emma breakfast, and focused on breathing. Howard thought he was closing a door on me, but he did not know I was already walking toward a different room. I did not respond in the group chat, and that silence felt like steel. Howard Pierce wanted a reaction he could mock, and he did not get one. Ethan Pierce sent a laughing emoji, and Caleb Pierce wrote a short comment about family tradition, like cruelty was a schedule. I watched the messages stack up. Then I muted the thread. Emma Pierce asked why I looked tired, and I told her I was just thinking about work. She was 6, and she deserved a childhood, not my father anger. After I dropped her at school, I sat in my car and let the sadness wash through, slow and familiar. Howard had called me a dead end before, not with those exact words, but with the same meaning. He praised sons who followed his plan, and he punished daughters who made their own. When I got pregnant, he said I had ruined my future. When I left a bad relationship, he said I embarrassed the family. When I fought for custody, he said I was dramatic, and he offered support only if I obeyed. Winning custody should have been my relief, but his message proved he still wanted to control the story. I went to work and kept my smile polite, because I had meetings and deadlines and real responsibilities. But under the surface, I kept replaying his line, heirs only. He was not inviting family, he was auditioning loyalty. That night, after Emma fell asleep, I opened my calendar and reviewed my schedule for the week. I had a policy briefing, a dinner meeting, and a guest I could not cancel on. Governor Daniel Hart was in town, and my team had placed me at the table, because education policy is my work and my lane. I stared at the restaurant name on my invite, and my pulse jumped because it matched Howard's birthday dinner. For a moment, I laughed under my breath, not because it was funny, but because life sometimes hands you a mirror. Howard thought he could block me from his table, but he had no idea I had my own seat, and it was not purchased with his approval. I did not tell anyone in my family about the dinner meeting, because I did not need their noise. I focused on Emma Pierce, my work, and the quiet routines that keep a life stable. I packed her lunch, checked her homework folder, and listened to her talk about a class project with bright eyes. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected another message from Howard Pierce, but I kept it face down. The night before the dinner, I laid out a simple outfit and reviewed my briefing notes. I was not going there to prove anything. I was going there to do my job. Still, I could not ignore the shadow. Howard's birthday message was not only an insult, it was a warning to the whole family. Do not treat Natalie Pierce like she matters. Ethan Pierce and Caleb Pierce played along, because being chosen feels easier than being fair. I thought about the way they never defended me. Not when Howard criticized my parenting, not when he questioned my custody fight, not when he suggested Emma should not carry the Pierce name. The pattern was clear. They wanted peace with Howard, and they paid for it with my dignity. Samantha at work asked if I was nervous about meeting Governor Daniel Hart, and I said I was focused. That was true. Fear is loud, focus is quiet. The next day I picked up Emma from school, made dinner, and read her a story until her breathing softened. When I turned off the light, I felt the weight of the week settle in my chest. Then I reminded myself of something simple. Howard Pierce could call me a dead end, but he could not erase my work, my voice, or the life I built. I wrote a short note to myself and kept it on the kitchen counter. Do not beg, do not chase, do not shrink. Then I set an alarm, took one slow breath, and went to sleep, because tomorrow would be long, and I intended to walk into it steady. The restaurant lobby smelled like polished wood and citrus, and the lighting was warm and deliberate. A host greeted me by name and guided me past the main room toward a private area. I could hear laughter in the distance, and I knew Howard Pierce would love that sound. A crowd, an audience, a room that confirms him. I kept my posture relaxed, because I was not there as a daughter asking permission. I was there as a professional with a role. When I reached the table, Governor Daniel Hart stood to shake my hand, and he thanked me for the briefing materials. I sat down, opened my folder, and started discussing the agenda. The conversation was calm, focused, and real. The kind of talk that shapes budgets and decisions. Then the front door opened again, and I heard a familiar voice, loud, proud, and certain. Howard. By a ton. A beat later, I saw Ethan Pierce and Caleb Pierce following him, dressed for celebration, scanning the room like they owned it. Howard turned his head, and his eyes landed on me. The change on his face was instant, like a mask cracking. He froze, because he did not expect to see Natalie Pierce at the best table in the building. He stepped closer, and his gaze flicked to Governor Daniel Hart, then back to me, as if trying to solve a puzzle he hated. Ethan looked stunned, and Caleb swallowed hard, suddenly less amused. The host approached Howard and asked if he needed help finding his party, and Howard tried to speak, but the words did not come out clean. I did not smile at him, and I did not glare. I kept my attention on my work, because that was the sharpest truth in the room. Howard wanted to announce that I was nothing, but he had walked into a room where my work spoke first. And for the first time in a long time, his voice was not the loudest thing people noticed. Howard Pierce recovered just enough to keep walking, because pride is his reflex. He guided Ethan Pierce and Caleb Pierce toward their reservation, but his eyes kept sliding back to my table. He was trying to decide what hurt more, seeing me there, or seeing who I was sitting with. Governor Daniel Hart noticed the shift, because experienced leaders notice tension fast. He asked, quietly, if everything was all right. I said yes, and I kept my tone calm, because I refused to turn my father into a distraction. Still, the room had changed for me. I could feel Howard Party glancing over, trying to place me, trying to understand why I was not in the category Howard assigned. When the server brought water, Howard crossed the main aisle like he owned it, then stopped near my table with a stiff smile. He said, my name like it was a warning. Natalie. Hanan. He asked what I was doing there, as if the restaurant belonged to him. Governor Hart stood and offered a polite greeting. The governor said it was a pleasure to meet him, and the words landed like a weight. Howard blinked, then forced a laugh that sounded wrong. He tried to talk about his birthday, about family tradition, about being proud of his sons. He did not mention the group chat. He did not mention heirs only. He did not mention dead end. He was scrambling to rebuild a story in real time. I answered with quiet courtesy, and I introduced myself as part of the Governor Education Advisory work. Howard's eyes tightened because he could not insult me without insulting the table I sat at. Ethan looked down at his shoes, and Caleb stared at the floor, because both of them knew what Howard wrote, and now it was trapped in their throats. Howard finally stepped away, face stiff, smile thin, and he returned to his party like a man carrying a crack in his own mirror. The dinner continued, and I stayed focused on policy, budgets, and the parts of the job that actually matter. Governor Daniel Hart asked thoughtful questions, and I answered with facts, because facts are a kind of power that does not need volume. Still, I could feel eyes on me from across the room. Howard Party kept looking over, as if my existence at that table was a rumor they needed to confirm. At one point, a woman from Howard Group, an aunt I barely knew, stood and approached with a bright, forced smile. She said she did not realize I worked with the governor, and she said it was impressive. The compliment sounded like surprise, and surprise sounded like judgment. I thanked her, then returned to my notes. I did not offer my story, because my story was never theirs to manage. When she walked back, I saw her whisper to Howard, and Howard's face tightened again. Ethan Pierce finally looked at me, and his expression was confused, like he was realizing I had been building a life while he was waiting for approval. Caleb Pierce tried to laugh with his table, but his laugh sounded thin. The loud confidence of the birthday party started fading, because people can sense when a hierarchy breaks. Governor Hart did not ask for details, but he glanced at me once, and his look said he understood more than he needed to. In that moment, I realized the real revenge was not humiliation. It was visibility. Howard wanted to erase me, and instead I was right there, steady, competent, and impossible to dismiss. After the meeting ended, Governor Daniel Hart shook my hand again, thanked me, and left with his team. The room shifted as soon as he walked out because authority moves attention like gravity. Howard Pierce watched the exit, then watched me, and his face held something close to panic. Ethan Pierce and Caleb Pierce stood uncertain because they did not know whether to follow Howard's orders or their own eyes. Howard approached me again, this time without the stiff smile. He hissed that I embarrassed him on his birthday. I looked at him and kept my voice even. I said he embarrassed himself the moment he called me a dead end, and the moment he said my daughter Emma Pierce was not welcome. The words landed hard because I said them in public without shouting. Howard's eyes widened because he did not expect me to name it. Ethan looked shocked, and Caleb went pale because now the insult had a shape and a witness. Howard tried to deny it, then remembered it was in a group chat, written in his own words. He lowered his voice and demanded I leave, like leaving would restore his power. I gathered my folder calmly, thanked the staff, and stood with my shoulders relaxed. I told Howard that I did not come for his approval, and I would not chase his table again. Then I walked out, and the air outside felt clean. I sat in my car and breathed, because the moment was not about winning. It was about ending a pattern. Howard called me a dead end to keep me small, but he accidentally handed me proof, and he did it in front of the only audience he truly fears. The next morning my phone lit up with calls, and I knew who it was. Ethan Pierce tried first, using a careful voice, like he was stepping around glass. He said Howard Pierce was furious, and he said the family felt confused, and he asked why I did not just stay away. I asked him a simple question. Why did you laugh in the group chat? Ethan went quiet, then said it was easier than arguing with Howard. Caleb Pierce texted next, saying he did not mean it, and he was sorry if I felt hurt. I read that line twice because it was not an apology. It was a way to shrink the harm. I told Caleb that Howard did not only exclude me, he excluded Emma Pierce, and he called us a dead end. Caleb replied with a long message about tradition, respect, and how Howard is from a different generation. I told him cruelty is not a generation. It is a choice. Both of my brothers kept circling the same point. They wanted me to calm Howard down, so they would not have to. I understood then that they were not calling because they suddenly cared. They were calling because the family hierarchy shook, and they wanted it stable again. I did not raise my voice, and I did not insult them, because calm is sharper. I told Ethan and Caleb that I would not be the family shock absorber anymore. I said if they wanted a relationship with me, it would require honesty, and it would require respect for my daughter. When the call ended, I stared at the kitchen sink, listening to the quiet drip of water. For years I believed my brothers were neutral, but neutrality is often just comfort dressed up as fairness. Howard Pierce sent a message later that day, and it was exactly what I expected. He said I humiliated him, and he said I ruined his birthday, and he said I should apologize to the family. He did not mention the words he wrote, and he did not mention Emma Pierce at all. That omission said everything. He was not ashamed of what he did. He was angry that it was seen. He followed with another message, softer, saying he only wanted the best for me, and that is why he wanted heirs only. I stared at that line, because it was a clean confession. He sees people as roles, and he sees love as inheritance. I did not respond immediately, because I wanted my reply to be simple. When I finally wrote back, I used one sentence. You do not get an apology for calling me a dead end and excluding my child. Howard replied fast, and his words turned sharp. He said Emma was not a real Pierce, and he said my choices ended the line. My hands shook for a moment, then steadied, because anger becomes fuel when it is clear. I told him that Emma is my daughter, and she is enough, and I will not let anyone speak about her like she is disposable. Howard tried to pivot, saying I was ungrateful, and he paid for things when I was younger. I told him I am grateful for the past, but I will not trade my daughter's dignity for his approval. After that, he stopped texting, and the silence felt like a door closing. It hurt, but it also felt clean, because I was done negotiating with contempt. That evening, Emma Pierce asked why I seemed quiet, and her small voice made my chest tighten. She was drawing at the table, crayons scattered like confetti, and she looked up with serious eyes. I did not tell her the full story, because she is 6, and children do not need adult cruelty. I told her that sometimes grown-ups say unkind things, and sometimes they do it to feel powerful. Emma asked if she did something wrong, and I said no, never, not even close. I said she is loved, and she is safe, and our home is a place where nobody has to earn kindness. Emma nodded, then asked if we would still have birthdays and family dinners. I told her yes, we will have birthdays with people who are happy we exist. Later, after she fell asleep, I sat on the couch and replayed the restaurant moment again. Not with anger, but with clarity. Howard Pierce wanted to decide my worth, and he tried to use a party as a weapon. But he did not know my life had grown beyond his permission. I opened my laptop, reviewed my next work schedule, and confirmed a school meeting for Emma. The ordinary tasks felt powerful, because they were mine. I realized that the best response to being called a dead end is building a life so full that the insult has nowhere to land. And for the first time I believed it fully. I do not chase their table, I build my own. The family rumor started the way it always does, in soft voices and group texts. Someone said I crashed Howard Pierce's birthday. Someone said I was showing off. Someone said I disrespected my father in public. The story changed depending on who told it, but the goal was always the same: make me the problem, so Howard Pierce could stay the center. Ethan Pierce called again, saying relatives were upset, and he suggested I send a message to smooth things over. I told him no, because smoothing things over is how the pattern survives. Caleb Pierce said Howard was only joking in the group chat, and I asked him why jokes exclude a child. Caleb had no answer, only discomfort. I realized they wanted me to explain myself so they could return to normal, and normal was always built on my silence. I did not post online, and I did not argue in family threads. I kept my attention on Emma Pierce, on work deadlines, and on the life I could actually control. When a distant aunt texted saying I should respect my elders, I replied once, "Respect goes both ways, and my daughter is not negotiable." Then I stopped responding, because boundaries are more effective than speeches. Howard Pierce did not contact me directly at first. He recruited the family. He called cousins, uncles, and old friends, and he told them a version of the story where he was the victim. He said I was bitter after custody court, and he said I was unstable, and he said I was trying to embarrass him. Hearing that word unstable made my stomach clench, because it is the label people use when they want to dismiss a woman without listening. Ethan Pierce repeated the label once, softly, like he was testing it. I told him to never use that word about me again. Not after he watched me fight for Emma and build a career. Ethan went silent, because he knew it was wrong, but he still wanted Howard approval. Caleb Pierce tried to defend Howard, saying he is old-fashioned, and he does not express love well. I told Caleb that love does not look like exclusion, and it does not look like calling your granddaughter a dead end. Howard then sent another message, this time to the group, saying he invited only heirs to protect the family legacy. He acted like legacy was a sacred thing, and my daughter did not qualify. That was the moment I understood the insult was not accidental. Howard meant it. He wanted everyone to agree, so the hierarchy would feel permanent. I kept my response minimal, because I knew Howard Pierce thrives on conflict. If I fought loudly, he could label me emotional. If I begged, he could label me weak. So I stayed steady. I went to work, met with my team, and continued projects that actually shape people's lives. Governor Daniel Hart office sent follow-up questions about the briefing, and I answered them with care because my work is not a performance. At home, Emma Pierce helped me water a small plant on the windowsill, and she laughed when the water spilled. That small laugh felt like the real legacy. A child who feels safe. In the evening, I wrote a short note for myself again, because words on paper can hold you upright. Do not chase people who erase you. I did not cut my family off in a dramatic way. I simply stopped feeding the machine. I blocked a few numbers, muted the rest, and kept my doors closed. Howard can host dinners, make rules, and crown heirs, but he cannot enter my life without my consent. That realization did not feel like revenge. It felt like freedom, quiet, steady, and earned. A week later, Emma Pierce's birthday planning filled our kitchen with glue sticks and colored paper. She wanted a small party, cupcakes and balloons, and she wanted her classmates, not a room full of adults who measure worth. I realized the timing was perfect. Howard Pierce had tried to use his birthday to announce my value, so I used my daughter's birthday to prove the opposite. I invited the people who showed up for us, teachers who cared, friends who helped, neighbors who checked in during the custody fight. Emma made a handmade list, and her handwriting wobbled like joy. There was no air talk, no legacy speech, no performance of superiority. There was only a child who felt safe. The day of the party, Emma laughed so hard she snorted, and then she looked embarrassed, and I told her it was the best sound in the world. When I watched her blow out candles, I felt a tight knot loosen in my chest. Howard Pierce could reject us, but he could not erase moments like this. After the guests left, Emma fell asleep holding a stuffed animal, and I sat at the table with leftover frosting on my finger. I thought about the restaurant again, and I understood something new. Howard table was never about love. It was about power. My table was smaller, but it was real. Ethan Pierce asked if we could talk, and I agreed to a call because I wanted to know who he was when Howard was not listening. Ethan said the family felt divided, and he blamed me for not smoothing it over. I asked him why he did not challenge Howard when he wrote that message. Ethan said Howard would have exploded, and he did not want drama. I told him the drama already happened, and it landed on me and Emma Pierce. Ethan tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, like words in a group chat are smoke. I reminded him that Howard wrote heirs only, and he excluded a 6-year-old child. I asked Ethan if he would accept that about his future children. Ethan paused, because the question forced him to see the cruelty without the familiar script. He admitted that Howard can be harsh, and he said Howard loves us in his own way. I told Ethan love that humiliates and excludes is not love. I will teach Emma to accept. Ethan grew frustrated and said I was making it bigger than it needed to be. I told him it was already big because it was about whether my daughter is treated like a person. Ethan went quiet, then said he did not know how to fix it. I said he does not have to fix it, he only has to stop supporting it. Howard Pierce tried to get ahead of the story again. He sent a message to the family group, saying he never called Emma Pierce a dead end, and he said I was twisting his words. I stared at the screen, because the message was still there, above his denial, in plain text. He was trying to rewrite reality, while the evidence sat in the same thread. That is the kind of confidence control gives you. The belief that people will accept your version, even when it contradicts their eyes. Caleb Pierce replied with a nervous joke, trying to lighten it. Ethan Pierce said nothing. I did not respond with paragraphs. I took a screenshot, saved it, and stepped away. If anyone asked me privately, I sent one line. Read the thread. That was enough. Howard then messaged me directly, saying I was poisoning the family, and I was teaching Emma to disrespect him. I answered once carefully. I am teaching Emma that love does not exclude her. Howard replied with anger, then silence, because he could not argue with that without exposing himself. I put my phone down, washed dishes, and listened to Emma humming in her room. My father wanted to bend the story until I broke, but I was not breaking anymore. I was learning something stronger than approval. I was learning self-respect. A few days after the screenshots, Caleb Pierce called me late. His voice sounded smaller than usual, like he had finally run out of jokes. He said Howard Pierce was raging, and the family group chat felt toxic. He said he did not know how things got this bad. I told him they got this bad because everyone kept choosing comfort over truth. Caleb sighed, then admitted he saw the message, and he knew Howard meant it. He said he laughed because it was easier, and now he felt sick about it. I did not punish him with insults, but I did not rescue him either. I told him, regret is not repair, and repair requires action. Caleb asked what action looks like, and I said it looks like speaking up, even when Howard gets loud. He went quiet, then said he was afraid of being cut off. I told him I understand fear, but fear does not excuse cruelty toward a child. Caleb said he would talk to Howard, and I told him not to do it for me. I told him to do it because Emma Pierce deserves basic respect, and because he deserves a spine. After the call, I sat in the dark living room, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I realized something. My brothers were not villains like Howard. They were trained. But training can be unlearned, if someone is willing to feel uncomfortable. Howard Pierce showed up in my inbox with a new tactic, and it was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. He wrote that he was willing to help financially, for Emma Pierce education, for a future fund, for anything I needed. Then he added the real condition. He said I needed to stop making him look bad, and I needed to apologize publicly. He framed it as generosity, but it was a purchase order for my silence. I forwarded the message to a friend, then deleted it from my screen because I did not want Emma to ever see it. I replied with one sentence, calm and clean. Emma is not a bargaining chip and I do not sell silence. Howard responded fast, and his words turned sharp, saying I was ungrateful, and I was raising Emma to disrespect her family. I told him I was raising Emma to recognize manipulation, and I ended the conversation. Later that night, Ethan Pierce sent a short text asking if I could please just take the money and move on. I told Ethan that moving on does not mean pretending harm did not happen. I told him if Howard truly cared, he would apologize without conditions. Ethan did not reply because conditional love is hard to defend out loud. The next weekend I wrote a letter, not to argue, but to close a door properly. I addressed it to Howard Pierce, and I kept the words simple. I wrote that he does not get to call me a dead end, and he does not get to exclude Emma Pierce, then demand respect. I wrote that I will not attend events where my child is treated like a mistake. I wrote that if he wants a relationship, he must acknowledge what he said, apologize to me and to Emma, and stop using the family as a weapon. I did not threaten, and I did not beg. I stated boundaries like facts, because boundaries are facts. I sent the letter, then I took Emma to the park, and I watched her race down a slide with fearless joy. That joy reminded me why I am doing this. I am not trying to win a fight with my father. I am trying to end a pattern for my daughter. When we came home, my phone stayed quiet, and the quiet felt honest. Howard can keep his Heir table, his rules, and his pride. I am building something else, and Emma is already growing inside it. Howard Pierce did not answer my letter right away, and the delay felt intentional. He wanted me to sit in uncertainty because uncertainty is one of his favorite tools. Then, late one night, he sent a message that read like a verdict. He said I was selfish, and he said I was poisoning Emma Pierce against him. He said a daughter who respects her father does not question family rules. He did not deny the words he wrote, and he did not apologize for excluding a child. Instead, he tried to turn my boundary into an attack. I replied with one calm line. Because calm keeps the power in my hands. I said, respect does not require humiliation, and love does not require exclusion. Howard answered with anger, calling me dramatic, and saying I always wanted attention. I stared at the screen, and I realized he needed to believe that because it protects his ego. If I am dramatic, then he is not cruel. If I am attention-seeking, then his words are not harmful. That framing is how he stays innocent in his own mind. I did not argue, and I did not send paragraphs, because paragraphs are where he twists. I told him the boundary stands, and I muted the conversation. Then I went to Emma's room and listened to her steady breathing. Her peace mattered more than my father's approval. A few days later, Ethan Pierce asked to meet for coffee. I agreed, because I wanted one conversation without Howard's shadow. Ethan arrived looking worn out, shoulders tight, eyes tired. He said the family was tense, and Howard Pierce was blaming everyone, and he was demanding loyalty. Ethan admitted he laughed in the group chat because he wanted to stay safe. Hearing him say, safe, made something click. Howard makes his own sons feel afraid, and they call that respect. Ethan said he did not like what Howard wrote about Emma Pierce, but he did not know how to challenge him. I told Ethan that silence is a choice too, and silence always protects the loudest person. Ethan stared at his coffee for a long moment, then asked if I would ever come back to family dinners. I said yes, but only if Emma is welcomed, and only if Howard owns his words. Ethan exhaled, like that answer was both relief and fear. He said, "Howard will never apologize, because he thinks apologizing makes him weak." I told Ethan that refusing to apologize is not strength, it is pride dressed up as authority. Ethan nodded slowly, and he did not argue. When we stood to leave, Ethan said he was sorry. Not with excuses, not with jokes, just sorry. I thanked him, and I told him repair is possible, but only with action, not comfort. The following week, my work pulled me forward again, in a way my father could not control. Governor Daniel Hart office called to confirm a new education initiative meeting, and they asked me to attend as a lead advisor. I accepted, because this is the work I built, and it matters beyond family drama. After the call, I sat at my desk and felt something settle inside me. Howard Pierce tried to define me as a dead end, but my life kept expanding anyway. I picked Emma Pierce up from school, and she showed me a drawing of our apartment with a sun in the corner and two stick figures holding hands. She labeled them Mommy and me, and my throat tightened. That picture was the real legacy, safety, stability, and love that does not come with conditions. That night, I opened my calendar and marked two things: Emma upcoming school event and my next meeting with the governor team. Then I wrote one line on a sticky note and placed it near the door. We do not chase tables that reject us. We build our own table, and we invite people who show respect. I looked around my home, heard Emma humming softly, and felt calm. Howard can keep his birthday rules, his Heir language, and his pride. I am not a dead end. I am a beginning. The next move surprised me, because it was quieter, and that made it more dangerous. Howard Pierce did not text me first. He tried to reach Emma Pierce through a family member, acting like he had a right to her attention. A cousin mentioned that Howard wanted to send a gift, and wanted to speak to Emma, just for a minute, like nothing happened. I felt my stomach tighten, because that is how he works. He skips the harm, then demands access. I told the cousin that any contact goes through me, and only after Howard acknowledges what he said. The cousin tried to soften it, saying Howard is old, and birthdays make people emotional. I answered that Emma is 6, and she is not responsible for an old man pride. That afternoon, Ethan Pierce called, saying Howard was telling people I was keeping Emma from her grandfather. I told Ethan that Howard kept himself away the moment he said, "My child was not welcome." Ethan went quiet, then admitted Howard was spinning the story. I reminded Ethan that the group chat still exists, and so do screenshots. Later, Howard sent a short message asking to see Emma, and he wrote it like a demand disguised as a favor. I replied once, and only once. I said you can see Emma after you apologize, and after you stop calling us a dead end. Howard did not answer, because an apology would require him to admit he was wrong. That silence was my confirmation. I tucked Emma into bed that night, and I promised myself again, I will not let him rewrite the rules around my child. Caleb Pierce called me with a shaky voice, and he said he tried to talk to Howard Pierce. Caleb said he told Howard the heirs message was cruel, and that excluding Emma Pierce made him look heartless. Howard did not take it as feedback, he took it as betrayal. Caleb said Howard started yelling, saying sons who question him are disloyal, and daughters who defy him are poison. Caleb admitted he felt scared in his own kitchen, and that sentence made my chest ache. I told Caleb that fear is not respect, and control is not love. Caleb said Howard also accused me of using the governor connection to embarrass him on purpose. I told Caleb the truth. I did not plan a trap. I attended a work meeting, and Howard walked into it because of his own choices. Caleb laughed once, without humor, and said Howard cannot accept that the world does not revolve around him. Before we hung up, Caleb asked what I wanted next. I said I wanted my daughter safe, and I wanted the family to stop treating Howard rage like weather. I said if they keep calling his cruelty tradition, Emma will learn that cruelty is normal. Caleb went quiet, then said he did not want that. I told him then he has to act like it, not just feel it. After the call, I sat at my table and looked at the sticky note near the door. We do not chase tables that reject us. I realized my boundary was working because it was forcing everyone to see the cost of staying silent. A few days later, an invitation arrived for another family gathering, and it came from an aunt who always followed Howard Pierce lead. The message sounded polite, but the rules inside it were sharp. She said the family wanted peace, and they wanted me there, but she asked that I come alone. And she suggested Emma Pierce stay home, because it would be easier. Easier for who was the question she avoided. I read it twice, and I felt the old pressure rise. The pressure to cooperate so everyone can pretend nothing happened. I did not accept. I replied with a clean line, and I kept my tone calm. I said, I do not attend events where my child is treated like a problem. Within minutes, Ethan Pierce texted, asking if I could just compromise once, for the sake of harmony. I told him harmony built on exclusion is not harmony. It is control with softer words. Then I turned my phone off and I took Emma to the library. She ran to the children corner, grabbed a book with bright pictures, and leaned into my side like the world was safe. Watching her, I felt something settle again. Howard Pierce wants to erase my name from his legacy story, and the family wants me to help him do it by showing up alone. I will not do that. If they want me in the room, they get all of me, including my daughter, and including the truth. The family gathering happened anyway, because Howard Pierce loves an audience, and the relatives still orbit his gravity. I did not go, and I did not send explanations, because explanations only feed the machine. Later that night, Ethan Pierce called, voice tense, saying everyone was asking where I was, and Howard was making speeches about loyalty. Ethan said Howard told the room that I was confused, and that I was keeping Emma Pierce from her family. I asked Ethan one question. Did anyone read the group chat message out loud? Ethan went silent, because silence is the answer. I told him the truth is still sitting in that thread. Heirs only, dead end, and my daughter not welcome. I said if the family wants peace, they should start by admitting what happened. Ethan said people do not want conflict, and I said conflict already happened. They just preferred that it happened to me. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and felt a strange calm. Howard can host dinners and perform leadership, but leadership without accountability is only control. I looked at Emma sleeping in her room, small hand curled around her blanket, and I knew I made the right choice. A child should not walk into a room where her existence is debated. If Howard wants access, he must stop demanding it like a right and start earning it like a relationship. The family can call me stubborn, but stubborn is often just another word for a boundary that finally holds. The next morning, Howard Pierce sent a message that tried to sound reasonable. He said we should meet, just the two of us, and talk like adults. He wrote that he never meant to hurt anyone, and he said people were exaggerating. Then he added one more line. He said Emma Pierce still should not come because she would distract from the conversation. I stared at that sentence because it revealed everything. He wanted a private meeting with no witness, and he wanted my daughter removed, like she was the problem, not his word. I replied with one sentence, and I kept it clean. I will meet when you apologize, and when you welcome Emma with respect. Howard answered with anger, calling me controlling, and saying I was turning the family against him. I did not argue, because arguing is where he tries to win. I simply repeated the boundary, and then I stopped responding. Later, Caleb Pierce texted, saying Howard was telling everyone I refused reconciliation. I replied to Caleb once, and I told him the truth. Reconciliation starts with accountability, not conditions. Caleb said he understood, and that was the first time he sounded like an adult, not a follower. I put my phone down and made breakfast for Emma. Because real life is built in small, steady moments. Howard can call me difficult, but I am not difficult, I am clear. And clarity is what breaks the old pattern. Weeks passed, and the noise slowly faded, because manipulation needs constant attention to stay alive. Howard Pierce stayed angry, but anger is less powerful when it cannot reach you. Ethan Pierce stopped calling as often, because he could not convince me to carry the family stress anymore. Caleb Pierce occasionally checked in, and his messages sounded more honest, less performative. I did not rebuild the family, because rebuilding is not my job alone. I rebuilt my life, the one Emma Pierce will inherit, a home where love is not conditional, and dignity is not a bargaining chip. At work, I continued meeting with Governor Daniel Hart team, and the projects moved forward because my career is real, not a rumor. I attended Emma school events, made dinner, read bedtime stories, and watched her confidence grow. One night, she asked if we were still a family. And I told her yes, we are a family, because family is who keeps you safe. I did not teach her to hate Howard Pierce. I taught her to recognize disrespect. Howard tried to label me a dead end, but a dead end is only a road that stops, and my life did not stop. It expanded. I stopped begging for a seat, and I started building a table, one decision at a time. If Howard ever chooses humility, the door will open carefully, with rules that protect my child. Until then, my answer stays simple. Emma and I are not a dead end. We are the start of something better.